Hi, everybody. So I'm using Prezi, and I hope it doesn't make anybody dizzy, so I'll try and keep it to a minimum. But I was asked here to talk about our diversity and inclusion efforts here at USA Swimming and to focus more on the strategic planning as far as the promotional end. And so I'm just going to give you like a 30-second review on where we've been, which will lead us to where we are going. So how many of you have ever seen our USA Swimming Diversity and Inclusion Mission Statement? Okay, great. How many of you even knew that we had one? Probably more of the majority there. So I just wanted to make sure that I brought this to light and that I shared this with you today, but it's pretty simple, but it's to assist USA Swimming in creating an inclusion and a culture of inclusion and opportunity for people of diverse backgrounds, including but not limited to race, age, income, ethnicity, religion, gender, and sexual orientation. And quite recently, a few years ago, we added the sexual orientation piece, which was a really nice step forward for us. And so hopefully you'll be able to see this more as we move forward, especially with the initiatives that we have. Okay, here's your 30-second history lesson. Our efforts were re-energized in 2005, so that was 10 years ago. And we had an outside task force come in to review our program and to give us recommendations for the future. So for the 2005 and 2006, these were some of the recommendations that they provided us. And I'm not going to go into each of them individually, that's more of a content, but we do still follow a lot of these recommendations today. And so there were 5 buckets of which we constantly go back to and look at, but that began in 2006. Really important, fast forwarding to 2013, all of the work that we have done, finally we put under the buckets of Build, Promote, Achieve. And I'm sure that all of you have heard those core objectives for USA Swimming. And so there's a couple of bullet points here. Again, I'm not going to go into the content of the things that we do. I am happy and available to speak to any of you about any of the details of these programs, but you could see that we kind of categorize the things we did, and where we feel like we lacked in some departments or some areas, we added some things, and where we felt we needed to scale back, maybe focus on more of our promising initiatives, we tried to focus on that. So in 2013, Build, Promote, Achieve, everything fell under those buckets. So that brings us to 2015, and in January, we had a strategic planning meeting. There were about 11 of us in the room from USA Swimming, members of our senior staff as well. And we sat down and we looked at the remainder of this year and the fall and 2016 to the end of the quad. And we had an outside facilitator come in to help us with our strategic planning, to do a little bit of cultural competency as well, some little education for our staff, which would help drive our efforts forward. And she showed us this video, and you know, after watching it, some of the information in the stats, very compelling information that it helped us really clarify why we were going to do this, where we're going to go with it, and so I wanted to show you that video today. I did modify the video a little bit. Matt thought it was just like Facebook. It was kind of not so edgy and kind of boring, so I just switched the music, and hopefully it will give it a little different feel. So hopefully that was a little bit better as far as the music goes. But there's really a lot of compelling stats, and I think my presentation actually was perfectly planned to go after Lauren. She said a lot of good things that kind of segue into some of the things that we're focusing on currently with our diversity and inclusion efforts. Particularly, you know, she talked a lot about the millennials, and you saw a lot of the stats on the millennials there. But I think some of the things that were most compelling for us were the stats of our population growth is 85% minorities moving forward. Also, half of our largest cities are a minority majority. And so those statistics alone, I think, really helped solidify our cause and our efforts and our desire to really help diversify our sport. And so that brings us to current, 2015 to 2016. And out of our strategic planning meeting, these 4 big basic points came about. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do want to focus on 1, 3, and 4. So number 1 is inclusion is intentional. And so we tend to gravitate towards people that look like us, or that have similar personalities, or that we can maybe identify in some way. And so for us to branch out of that sort of natural tendency, it needs to be intentional, it needs to be thoughtful, it needs to be consistent. And so the one thing too with our diversity and inclusion efforts in the past was that we had our diversity and inclusion team over here, and then we had all the rest of USA Swimming over here. And so one of this inclusion is intentional points is that we want to take inclusion and we want to weave it into the fabric of everything that we do on our website, in our programming, in our staff, in our membership, so that it's not this thing over here that the D&I folks take care of, but it's something that we're always thinking about as a whole, as a group. And so number 3, need for a consistent messaging strategy throughout USA Swimming. And so this goes into a little bit more of the promotional and the messaging piece. But we had a couple of pages that maybe had some images with some diverse athletes, diverse coaches, but we didn't have many materials that were maybe translated into Spanish. Our languages may be different, not somewhat consistent, and so our focus then moving forward is to make sure that our messaging strategy is consistent. And then finally, to cultivate and leverage new and existing partnerships. And so I'm going to talk really briefly later on about some of our existing partnerships, but we want to try to create new ones or maybe leverage the ones that we already have to see if they have D&I initiatives and see how we can weave that into what we do. So our target audience is going to be, or has been, the African American community and the Hispanic community. And a lot of the research that the USOC has done and a lot of the research that we've done has helped us target kind of how to market or how to invite them and how to make our sport more inviting for these particular demographics. And the reason that we have chosen those two particular in general, at least currently, is that this is the current US Census data versus our USA Swimming information. Sorry. And so here we have the census data is in blue, and you can see that it's broken down between these particular ethnicities, and then this is our USA Swimming data. And in some of the areas, we are pretty similar in our mixed category and our Asian ethnicities. It's about the same, but we have the greatest disparities between our African American and our Hispanic communities. And so with the African American community, we are about 12% below the current census, and as far as the Hispanic and Latino communities, we are about 15%. And so we find that those are probably our greatest places that we can invite and make our sport more inclusive for those particular communities. Okay, so here's the overall slide, Build, Promote, Achieve, of some of the things that we have come up with as far as our January planning session. But here are more of the promote items. And again, you can read that there. Some of our existing things that we had already done, we will continue to do, but maybe with a higher presence, maybe with a little bit more mindfulness of the messaging that we're trying to get out. And if you didn't know, we do have 2 very specific web pages for diversity and inclusion. It's the Sigma Gamma Rho and the diversity web page. And so if you're interested in that information, you can go there. But partnerships, adding some new partnerships, 2 new multicultural corporate sponsors by 2016. And that could be a really huge step for us moving forward as far as the progress that we would like to make in this particular area. But as far as like programming, we have some examples here: Swim Team and Learn to Swim, social media highlights of 3 diversity camps, or some of our multicultural events. So hopefully as you move forward, you'll start to see some of this messaging. You'll start to notice a little bit more highlight on some of our more diverse athletes and maybe some of our communities and programming that we currently do, if you don't already. Okay, and so here is just some imaging and some photos of some of the things that we currently do. And as you guys know, the Swim Today campaign, and when we talk about a consistent messaging strategy, we are going to do an audit of all of our programming and marketing materials in the future about whether or not it represents images of the kinds of communities that we're trying to welcome into our swimming family. And so as you can see here, we've done a nice job with these 2. And then over here is the partnership with Sigma Gamma Rho that has been with us for the past few years. How many of you guys know what that is? The Sigma Gamma Rho partnership. Okay, wow. Okay, so I'm going to kind of highlight it a little bit because it is, it's a really very impactful and very effective, in my mind, program. And so we partner with Sigma Gamma Rho. They are a sorority, and they are historically African American sorority. And so they are our ambassadors for our sport, where they go out into the communities and they promote Learn to Swim. They do a lot of charity work. They do a lot of fundraising, and they try to promote the sport of swimming, all of its benefits, to the communities that they are in close contact with. And so we've just signed a 2-year agreement with them to continue the partnership, and we have events throughout the year where we go to their conferences, we do swim clinics with their sisters who are all women and have daughters, and try to get the word of USA Swimming and the Learn to Swim and water safety initiatives. And then finally here we have 3 photos here. This is a recent partnership with the New York City Parks and Recreation. And it is a partnership between USA Swimming, Metro Swimming, the LSC, and New York City Parks and Recreation. And they already had an existing swim team program where we then signed a 3-year agreement with them that over the next 3 years that the swimmers under the New York City Parks and Recs program are now USA Swimming members under a blanket outreach, as well as their 50 coaches, which are now USA Swimming member coaches, and we will provide some coach education, some athlete education throughout the 3 years in a graduated approach wherein by the 3rd year, they have created some funding to sustain the program once the program is over. And so we hope to create more partnerships like this in other cities using the same type of model. And so finally, what's next? Do you guys have any questions before the end part? Okay, so what's next beyond 2016? And so as you know, we usually do our strategic planning and our quad planning every quad. So we'll get together after the quad is ended to figure out where we would like to, where we are and the direction that we need to go. But our ultimate goal is this. And we need to start with the end in mind. And our ultimate goal is that we would like our membership numbers to reflect those of the census, of the US Census. And so that's our projected goal, is to be closer to that in the year 2040. And that's in 6 quads from now, in 25 years. And so our thought is that our change is generational. I mean, we do a lot of work, we put a lot of effort, and sometimes we don't necessarily see the fruits of our labor and our changes until the next generation, where we've influenced the influencers to then influence the next generation. So hopefully in 2040, our numbers will reflect a little bit closer to our census data, and that will be where we would like to be. And so finally here, kind of highlighting this generational approach, this is our membership information from 2003 to 2014. And it's broken down into these 4 categories. And as you can see here, you know, with the Asian category, with our Asian communities, we've actually seen some steady growth, you know, without very little effort at all. We've seen some growth there, as well as in the mixed category, which is here in purple. But as far as our Hispanic communities, which are green, we have seen some slight growth, but with our African American communities, it's pretty much been the same. So 0.9 to, at our highest, 1.1. And so hopefully we'll start to see those changes maybe in the next 10 years, hopefully more so in the next 20, but to kind of keep that in mind as far as that long-term, to the end, kind of marathon versus track meet mindset.